Welcome to this week's episode of Crap No One Tells You. With me today is Dawn, who owns a daycare and is going to talk to us about some of the crap no one tells you about owning and running a daycare. So, welcome, Dawn.
Thank you, Gummy. Good to be here.
Let's start with a basic question. What is some crap no one tells you about running a daycare?
Well, some of the crap that no one tells you is that you have to be available the entire time the center is open. So we are open from 6:30 in the morning till 6 in the evening. So I have to be available that entire time, whether or not I'm at the center or not, to be able to answer questions, um, guide whatever needs to be guided. But yes, all the time all the time I have to be available. And even at night, because sometimes a parent will contact me and say, um, I forgot my daughter's shoes. Can you meet me at the daycare center to pick them up? Or I don't know when it wasn't marked on the paper when my 6-month-old had her last bottle and how much. So those are things that have to constantly be managed throughout the day. So it's a full-time 24/7 job, except for on the weekends.
Except most of the
I
time.
get my weekends off most of the time,
Yeah. Except when you get invited to birthday parties.
which I love.
Yeah, okay. Right.
I do.
But it's that fine line. Is it still work?
Yes, agreed. Agreed. Yes. So that's
So
one thing.
you started the daycare a few years ago.
Yes. We started First Friends in 1988. I was coming from another center that was failing. And I honestly was planning on opening a center when I was older after I had my children. But my then boyfriend, who is now my husband, had a lot of faith in me and just said, I think we can do it. So with him, we started First Friends with 3 children and Ken and I and one other staff member. And it grew. Thankfully, that was at a time in the late 80s. It was at a time when they would say, if you build it, they will come. So daycare centers were just starting to become popular. Moms were starting to branch out and really, really work, get into the workforce and put their children other places than with family members. So thankfully, as a small center, it did not take us very long to become filled up. Yeah, and so we've been running since then.
Is that a common issue in the daycare industry? Is not having enough children signed up, or because you said we were fortunate enough to
Well,
fill ours up.
well,
I
we
know you generally have a waiting list.
yes, but we came from so I came from another center where I had relationships and that center was closing. So we were lucky enough to get a lot of those children. And then again, there were very few centers back then. So yes, we filled up quickly. 38 children, not a lot, but at the time, I think we were filled within 6 months. Yes, that is unusual today
So
to be
with
filled that quickly.
38 children, how many staff members do you need?
There's 11 of us.
Okay.
There's 11 of us.
Is there like a ratio, kid to
Yeah.
teacher
Yeah,
ratio?
depending on the age of the child. Yeah, so the younger babies have a 1-to-4 ratio, and then the older children, 3, 4s, and 5s have a 1-to-10. I'm sorry, yeah, 1-to-10, and then the toddlers are 1-to-6.
Okay,
Yeah,
so one teacher per 10 kids, or one per 6, one per 4.
correct, depending on the age of the child. And that is that's a state licensed requirement. That's not my requirement.
So the staffing requirement really comes down to how big is your center or how many kids do you have?
Correct. Correct.
So
Yes.
what do you think if you were starting over, not even if you were starting over, if you were expanding or contracting, what do you think is a good number? Like if I was opening a daycare tomorrow and said, "Oh, I'm going to make it 100-child daycare." Like is that
Um, Today, right now,
Mm.
in this climate, um, you probably could fill it with children. You're not gonna fill it with staff. So there is currently a childcare crisis in this country. COVID started it, and then it just kind of snowballed. Um, Everybody in the world is paying more than childcare can pay. So people are going to Uber or Wawa or Walmart and making way more money than we can make. I mean, that we can pay because we have a finite amount of revenue that we can take in.
right? Because you're limited by you can only have X
Tuition.
number of kids per teacher,
Exactly.
so the numbers have to
Exactly.
add up.
So there are a lot of centers, right? We are small, so we have luckily, we are able to maintain our center. However, there are a lot of larger centers out there that have the rooms, can open up the rooms and enroll more children. They just can't get the staffing. hence the crisis.
So they're paying for overhead that they really
And many have closed. Many have closed because they just can't afford it. So the larger centers have huge mortgages, huge rents, right?
Mhm.
If they don't have a full center, that's going to be a problem. And then the smaller in-home centers after COVID just kind of said, it's too much. We just can't maintain.
So that brings up an interesting question because we've talked to people across multiple industries and everybody's saying the cost of everything is going to go up. The cost of
It's definitely going up.
materials it's all going up, right? So do you think we're looking at a situation where childcare is going to go up a little bit or going to go up drastically? Because you're going to have to pay like
As a parent of a
correct.
my
Like,
center,
I have two, I have two kids, but I also run a business, right? So I understand that.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
right now, you can go work at Banana Republic and make, $19 an hour folding clothes.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you're necessarily qualified to work with children,
Correct.
right? But
Correct.
if someone that is qualified to work with children is looking at an extra $200 a month to go stand at Banana Republic or stand at Wawa or whatever in full clothes,
Mhm.
for some that may not even be a choice.
It's an easy decision for them. Yeah. Um, that has been that. Okay. So there's been a staffing crisis as well as a childcare for the last, I'd say probably 8 years. There are less teachers going into the field. So we have less teachers coming out with bachelors, which is a problem because they usually go right to the school district because they pay better. And we usually get the ones that are just starting out and then they move on from us to the school district. But we're having trouble with that right now because there aren't enough teachers for even the school district. And the people that are out there, like I said, want a higher salary. So we are in a pinch right now. We are in a pinch because even my existing staff can't afford to really be living on the salary that I'm paying them because inflation is so high. So it's a balance.
And just to be clear, it's not like you're paying staff minimum wage. Like you pay
No,
your,
no.
you pay your staff
No.
decently. So
I
it's not like
do pay them decently.
like you're not,
I
you're
do.
super competitive
I
with
am.
other daycares. Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. But my husband and I have always been able to manage it so that we haven't had to increase tuitions that much. There's been years that we've never increased when the economy's been really rough. If we didn't have to, we wouldn't do it. We usually only increase enough to cover the cost of the teacher salaries. But that may change a little bit this year just because in order to retain and keep or to retain and attract good staff, and I will not settle. So in order to get good staff, we have to pay. So there's a little bit, it's a fine line we walk, a very fine line.
yeah, I've been saying for years that the cost of daycare, the cost of certain social services, as I call them, has been relatively inexpensive. Because if I were to hire a nanny to stay with 2 or 3 kids,
Yeah.
you're not getting one
Yeah.
for less
Yeah.
than $400
That's
a
right.
week or
That's exactly
whatever it is.
That's exactly right.
But yeah,
The state is talking about there's a bill I believe in the state house right now where because COVID has really kind of like put a spotlight on childcare, right? Because all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we didn't realize how much we needed childcare in this country, right? Because all of a sudden everybody's like, oh my gosh, all these daycare centers closed, and where am I going to put my child so I can go back to work? So employers want daycare to be accessible, right? So now it's all of a sudden showing at the state level and the federal level. So at the state level right now, there is a bill that is in the House that is hoping when it passes will give every single child care provider, teacher, assistant, whatever, an automatic $2 an hour raise.
so that's
Coming
for Pennsylvania.
That's in PA right now.
Okay.
Pennsylvania. Yeah, I don't. That's at the
That's
federal level.
okay.
That's in PA. So we're just waiting and hoping that that passes, and that the funds are there to sustain that. That's the problem, is sustainability.
So would you tell someone coming out today, go open a daycare? It's fantastic.
I love what I do. I've loved it for 33 years. It's hard right now. It's hard. There are COVID has put a lot of restrictions on us, a lot of expectations on us. So that's been challenging. I think if you love the field, if you love being with children, if you love the administrative piece, if you love interacting with adults, I think it's a great field to go into with the understanding that a lot of people think opening a daycare center is just babysitting, it's way more than that. And I think you have to be really dedicated and be willing to put in those long hours if in fact you want to go into the daycare field, childcare field at this time.
So as running a center, if you had to say, I spend X amount of time doing administrative work and I get to spend X amount of time with the kids, what would be that ratio?
It's changed over the years, right? So I just recently, in the last year or so, took on an assistant. So she's doing a lot of that, covering the classroom for me. But right now, it, so I own a small center. So as a
Yep.
small center, I don't necessarily have to have an assistant. I have an assistant now because I'm, I can now, getting older. But I don't need one. And probably someone starting out wouldn't want to do that because it's a large salary, right? To pay for
Mhm.
somebody that a work you could do yourself. But years ago,
Well, it's work you can do yourself, but a lot of other work then gets pushed to off
absolutely,
hours. Right? Like, so
absolutely,
it's a trade-off.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yes. But with a small center, a small business like that, the owner has to step in.
Yep.
So if I can't find a sub, which I can't always, I'm in the classroom and everything in the office stops. And that is really my business model, that the kids come first. So if I need to be there, that's where I am and everything gets pushed aside. I do payroll at night. I do my calls back to parents or emails back, early in the morning or on the weekends. It's just what you do to be able to operate a small business. So if you were going to open one today, again, you would have to be willing to put a lot of time in. My daycare center was born before my children were born, and my kids grew up, but my daycare center never did. So that's been my third child all this time. So it's like a child that never grows up.
That never grows up. I never get to send them to college. I'm stuck.
It's always there. But anyway, that's you have to love children and you have to love that interaction with them so much that sometimes you have to put in time that you would be normally spending with your own family at the business. And I think any small business owner would say that.
Yeah, I mean,
Anybody that's
and
that
anybody
is-
that started a business realizes the first
Yeah.
year, 2, 5 years, whatever it is,
Mhm.
a half day is an 8-hour day.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
so I also had some questions about. I hear all these like teaching theories, like certain franchised
Mm.
daycares have what they call STEM programs, and like I'll give you a perfect example. My wife was dead set on finding a center that had like a STEM center and had curriculum and all that stuff, and
So
I didn't quite agree with that, but that's just me. Are there different, like when I, as a parent, go look at putting my child into a center, are there different things that I should be looking at that when choosing a center for my child?
Well, it depends on what you want, right? So there's Montessori schools. Some parents like Montessori schools. There are play-based schools. There are academic-based schools, right? So we are play-based because that is what Piaget and Vygotsky believe is how children learn. They're theorists, and so we provide a curriculum and an environment where children can learn through play. So yes, STEM, for people who don't know what that is science, technology, engineering, and math. And the federal government came up with that about 10 or 12 years ago, maybe more now. And that was pushed down from the federal government because we needed more of our own people to be able to go into those fields. We were pulling too many from other countries, right? So now
So we needed more engineers.
yes,
mathematicians.
exactly.
Okay.
But what's crazy about it is a good center was doing that already, right? They just weren't calling it STEM. So a good center is putting all of that as a part of their curriculum into their lesson plans, and children are learning that automatically. But somebody like your wife wouldn't necessarily know that, right? So there are schools that say, "Oh, we promote STEM." Well, everybody should be promoting STEM. That's just a part of. I mean, that should be a part of your daily curriculum and lesson planning.
So you use that word curriculum. I don't even think a lot of parents, especially new parents, realize that there are actual curriculums at daycares. Like it's not a, hey, come in and play for 6 hours and then go home, right?
No. So we use creative curriculum, which is, like I said, we set the environment up for play. And then we do intentional things. Like for example, this week we're doing outer space week, and the teacher's hanging up, planets from the ceiling. And there's a rocket ship off on the corner that the kids could play with. The toddler teacher made a rocket ship for the kids to get in. So we make sure that what we're doing revolves around what we're teaching them, right? So there's an interest level there. But there are different types of curriculum. Some are very academic. I do believe children should be ready for kindergarten, but I do not believe they should be doing kindergarten work when they're in preschool. I think that there's plenty of time to be in elementary education. And I think being a 4-year-old is not a time to do that. So yes, we're preparing them for kindergarten, but in a fun way, right? In an enjoyable way. So by the time they get to kindergarten, they have all those skills, but they're not burned out.
Got it.
Okay. We also have standards now in Pennsylvania, early learning standards. We've had for probably 20 years, 18 years maybe. And now, so as teachers in the school districts have standards, now we have standards. So when a teacher is designing her lesson plan with the activity that she's designing, whether it be a fine motor, a cognitive activity, a gross motor, fine motor, whatever that is, she is trying to meet a standard with that activity. So, so that's one thing that has really improved since I opened First Friends, is the fact that we've gone from really just kind of babysitting to really being,
Educational facility.
yeah. To just teach children how to be more well-rounded.
Because
For the
most kids learn a lot of social skills as well, which,
well, and that's one of our biggest
well,
work on.
but that's one of the things people don't realize. And then, you go to a birthday party and you see the kid that's been home the entire time, and you see the kid that's been in a daycare center, and you're like, wow, that's quite the difference.
Yeah, because they learn, they learn their social skills. They have to learn them. It's not something, language comes automatically. The brain is wired for language, but those social skills, not so much. So they have to be taught. We have to model those skills. And so, and they're, and you have to present what, you can't expect a child who's 12 months old to share. So if you say, oh, you need to be sharing, no, that's not in their wheelhouse. They can't do that, right? So you need to have a teacher who knows child development, that knows that children really, really can't start sharing really until they're probably closer to 2.5 or 3.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 25.
Well, in terms of my husband, we're still learning how to share. But anyway, social skills are huge. In fact, years ago, I was talking to a kindergarten teacher, and I said, what do you want from the kids that come to your class? And she said, I just want you to have them socialize. She said, I can teach them if you send them to me with the ability to negotiate, problem solve, stand in line for a certain length of time without touching their peers. Those are skills that children need to be able to learn. If they don't have those skills in place first, the learning's going to take a lot longer to go into effect.
So is there any type of cooperation between kindergarten teachers and daycares? Like, do they generally talk? Is there like a kindergarten convention that?
So yes and no. Over the years, Central Bucks has tried to do that, and it really depends on,
So that could be unique to the school district you're in.
Oh, yes.
Tried it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's not really a whole lot. I mean, we try really hard to have that partnership with our area elementary schools. We've often had kindergarten teachers come over and read a story to the preschool children. So that's one way to help with that transition. But there's not a formal transition type of in terms of,
Nobody has a list that says, hey, they should know these things before they.
Well, we do. We have that list. Yeah, we do. And that's what we're working with the children when they're, in their 4 to 5 year age. But there's no like formal meeting with the kindergarten teachers and saying, okay, this child is here, this child's there. That's something that just happens
It's more of a general, we expect them to be at this
Yeah.
level when they enter.
Yeah, exactly.
Fascinating. So me and my assumptions actually didn't realize that in order to be the head of a classroom, certain classrooms, you actually need a full bachelor's degree, which I was like,
Well,
well,
okay. So
okay,
yes and no.
okay,
So so we are licensed by the Department of Human Services. Right?
okay.
And they don't require a bachelor's degree. They require a certain amount of either experience a certain amount of education or a combination of both to be able to be what's called a group supervisor or a teacher. It's the STARS program that came into effect back in 2000.
Same thing. It's a Pennsylvania only.
Pennsylvania only.
Okay.
Yes. And the STARS program is a quality initiative, and there's 4 different STAR levels, and each STAR level that you achieve is higher quality, right? So with that, in the STARS program, they are encouraging you to have teachers that have 4-year degrees. Now, at First Friends, I'm not looking for somebody with a 4-year degree in the baby room. In the baby room, looking for somebody who is a mom,
Right,
or a dad, but that has experience with an infant or a baby, right? I'm looking for that 4-year degree teacher in early childhood education in my preschool classroom, because that teacher needs to get those children ready for kindergarten. So you're kind of right in a sense. There's just not enough 4-year degree teachers out there to be.
so for someone shopping around in Pennsylvania, for example, we can use the STARS.
Oh,
to kind
absolutely.
of- Do other states have similar
Yes, they do.
programs? Or
Mhm.
okay, so everybody has some kind.
Not everybody, not every
Okay.
state, but many states do have a quality program or quality.
And is that something as a parent you should ask for when you go to kind of get an idea where the daycare stands? What-
Yes. So there's a couple different accreditations. NACI does an accreditation, National Association for the Education of Young Children. They do an accreditation. And then there's the STARS program. So NACI is national and STARS is state. So most people do the STARS program because it doesn't cost anything. NACI, there's a cost involved.
Okay.
And then with the STARS program, when they first got started, there were always if you got to this level, you got a certain merit award that you could spend either on your staff or on your classroom or on your center. So it was people were more interested in being in the STARS program. There was something they could get out of it. So yes, so if you're a parent looking for a child care center in the state of Pennsylvania, I would definitely ask if they're STAR 4. That would be the highest quality.
And you said these programs exist elsewhere, just may have different names.
In other states.
Right.
In Pennsylvania, it's a STARS program, yes.
So as a parent, just look up in your state, what would they, like if I wanted to Google it for, I don't know, Montana, would I just search for child care rating system or?
Yeah, maybe something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I know it takes a while, right? Because for years, it's part of my job to educate parents when they come in to interview about what the STARS program is about. So now when 15 years ago, I'd say, do you know what the STARS program is? No, I have no idea. And I had to explain. Now people know. So it's out there.
Right.
It's been out there. And so we in the state of Pennsylvania, parents are aware of what to look for. In other states, I don't know. They could be at different levels of their quality initiative programs.
But definitely something parents should look up.
Yeah, I definitely would.
Yes,
I
okay.
definitely would. Yeah. And you also have to decide, do you want a center that's highly academic? There's some centers that are very academic that want their kids like reading before kindergarten. If that's what you want, then you need to look for a center like that. If you want your children to learn more through a play-based curriculum, then you need to look for a center that does that. There's other centers out there now that are Hispanic or Ukrainian that teach their students those particular
Like a second language. Or...
Yeah, so there's a lot out there. You just have to know what you're looking for, what you want before you start your search.
I don't think people shop around nearly enough when it comes to daycares, to be honest with you.
I think people shop around more for their houses than they do for
They shop around for a lot of things more than they.
Yeah,
but
a lot of it's word of mouth.
Yeah.
So that's certainly I mean
you are unique in the fact that you are, well, first of all, you're an extremely small community. So like you really are a community daycare center. You've been around for, when I first moved into there and I told my, people, yeah, I'm putting my girls up at First Friends, and everybody was like, oh yeah, I had my kids there. Oh, and then it got to the point where it was like, oh yeah, my kids are putting her. And I'm like, wow, she's been around for a while now, huh?
Yeah.
But it was very interesting how I realized early on that you really were a community center. You weren't just a daycare.
No, correct.
That you're connected through the entire community, through all the kids that have come through there.
Correct.
And I think that's also one of the things that parents don't realize. I didn't realize this when I started putting my kids in daycare or put them in school, is by default, I am going to get to know some of these parents.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
Like,
Yep.
there's no
Yep.
way, like, we get
Birthday
it
party.
exactly,
Yep.
the
Field
Christmas, the
trips.
field
Yep.
trip, like,
Yep.
by default, you're pushed into at least getting to know the people that go to school with your
Your
children.
child. Absolutely.
So for us, it was phenomenal when we started hearing that, knowing that people that were, or the kids that were at the center and the parents were all local community, because, now we go to we had a birthday party this weekend and it was literally 2 houses up from us,
Mm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
previously our daycare was 35 minutes away from our house. A lot of the parents didn't socialize. I think I remember going to one birthday party for a child, but there wasn't that sense of
Yeah.
community where,
Yeah.
like, it was
Yeah.
close knit. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of these other factors, I think, that
Agreed.
people don't take into consideration when selecting their daycares. And
Yes, some parents prefer their center to be close to where they work.
right,
Some parents prefer their center to be closer to where they live. So it just, that's another one of those things that you have to figure out before you start your search.
yes,
Because there are a lot of centers out there. Many of them are high quality, some not so much. But you have to. I always, when I tell parents to go, and I tell them when they come to my center, go to other centers. Don't just make your first choice with me. But I tell them when you walk in, your very first gut feeling will be what will be absolutely spot on. So if you walk in and nobody meets you at the door, or you see, kids running down the hallway, or, it's a terrible, odor, and that's huge. So you need to like step back.
there's a lot of indicators that,
Yes.
that
Yep. Yeah.
if they're red flags,
Yes.
they are
Yes.
red flags,
Yes.
right? They're not
Yes.
just yet.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
it was funny because we had our kids at a different center before
Mhm.
we moved.
Mhm.
I mean, the only reason we swapped that center at this time is because we moved. And I always told my wife, I'm like, something feels off here. Like, yes, we loved a couple of the teachers that were there, but, like, I think in the year and a half that we were there, that center went through 3 directors. Our youngest had 7 different teachers
In a year.
in a year and a half. And I was like, something's definitely off here. And then the difference when we went to a center, and you've already let the cat out of the bag that I have kids at your daycare. The difference was we had this kids there, and then all of a sudden, and I'm like, wait a minute, I've been seeing the same teacher now for a year, right? Like, in fact, one of the teachers that when we started there, how's it, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
Still there? That what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
She's now the same teacher my first kid loved is now, being treated the same way.
So that
like
takes a
second,
lot of work, right? That
It
takes a
doesn't-
lot of work.
it does. And like, that's
Takes a
the
lot of
thing
work.
I don't, it's the human resource side of thing, right? That's the element that nobody explains to you is you are in an industry where we pay people shitty. Like, there's no way around it.
No,
And everybody knows.
They're worth way more than what we can pay them.
Yes. So there's gotta be other things that keep people there, right? And that's where you're already in an industry that is designed to care for someone. But I don't think a lot of the directors that are just brought in to direct a center care as much about their teachers as they expect the teachers to care for the children. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think a lot of directors that are brought in um, maybe have the education to run a center, but maybe not the experience. And it could be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming at times. So yes, my role is to not only support the children, but to support my staff, right? Because if my staff stay, then the kids are happy if they have the same. We don't want a lot of turnover. Um, children go through. They're very flexible. Children very flexible, but they need consistency to learn effectively. So when their brains in a state of anxiety because they're getting new teachers all the time, they're not able to learn. The brain doesn't learn when there's anxiety, right? So we need them to always be very, calming and comforted and feeling safe. And so having the same staff members provides that. I also, when I hire my staff, I ask them to think about whether they can stay for a year. If they can't stay for a year, then this isn't a job for them. I don't want them coming to my center to try it out, see if they like it. They have to come in, do a trial day, and then they have to commit to a year if they are offered the job. So
Is that common in
No.
your industry? That's okay.
Mm-mm.
It's actually a good idea.
Mm.
I like it.
Well, it does. I mean, listen,
It doesn't always work,
things
but it
happen,
eliminates. Yeah.
but it certainly it sets up it sets up my expectation.
Yes.
which is
That you're not looking for someone like temporarily that just wants to,
try it out and see.
let
if
me
I
try
like
hanging out with some
it.
kids.
Yeah,
see if I like
exactly,
this.
exactly.
But you're also in that unique situation where you can do that
Okay,
because, I mean, you've built a reputation. You know, that was very good. Well, thank you for coming in.
Welcome.
And who knows, maybe I'll bring you on at a different point in time to talk about some more
Something
small
else.
business stuff.
Thanks,
So,
Jimmy.
thank you for listening to this week's episode, and we will be back next week.